Healthy relationships really are the foundation for all of these other videos. The host home setting focuses on relationships because the client gets to live in a home with a family. As you get to know your client, you're going to be building trust with them, which will make them begin to feel safe. There will be a lot of hard days, but remember, you might be the first person to ever offer a healthy, appropriate relationship.
So now we're going to talk about what are behaviors. When it comes to behaviors, a lot of times we look at the negative behaviors or the bad things that our consumers do. But we really need to start focusing on the positive behaviors because they are behaviors as well. If we focus on the positive behaviors and when we praise those behaviors, you're going to see that over time with consistency, some of those negative things are going to start to diminish or fall away. But when it comes to negative behaviors, there's an ABC to remember. There's antecedent, behavior, and then consequence. Whenever you're having some of those negative behaviors, if you look before that happened, that's your antecedent. And it's always going to link back to that consequence. So with that consequence, did they actually get what they wanted from that behavior? If you're struggling to find the antecedent to that behavior, we need to look back to Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. It starts at basic human needs and goes to self-actualization. If there's a gap in any one of those, that's where some of your negative behaviors are going to be stemmed from.
You might wonder why I'm juggling. Well, I'm here to talk about patterns of behavior. And that's what we're going to address here is patterns of our consumers' behavior. A lot of these informative videos have been talking about relationships. And honestly, that's a lot of the patterns, knowledge of those consumers' patterns come into effect, okay? So we're going to talk about, in this pattern here, where you're calm and normal, all right? And then generally, most people know about their consumers, they know what impacts them, and they know what can trigger them. Trigger is just another way of saying something that induces anxiety and starts the acceleration or the escalation into negative events or behaviors, okay? So a lot of times you guys know about certain activities will bring on a trigger, certain behaviors, situations where they produce anxiety, does bring on behaviors, being around certain people sometimes too. When that trigger is set off, usually you see an escalation. Most people are able to identify the escalation of, an emotional response sometimes, or physically, people getting tight, hands tense, emotionally they might become withdrawn or quiet, things of that nature, okay? You guys usually see the intensity increase or behavior increase too, to move towards what would be called a harmful event or the crisis situation. Generally, the crisis situation with the people that we deal with, we're talking about physical aggression, we're talking about property destruction, self-injury, and then sometimes elopement too. That's where we really need to find a way to intervene. As we go forward, following that crisis event, then usually we have a de-escalation. There are multiple ways to help bring about this de-escalation, and a lot of that is covered in our videos. Generally, when we see a de-escalation, we see a decrease in the behavior. We also see individuals try to make it okay by either denying that they did things, minimizing the outcome or the impact, and many times you'll see them blaming others. At times also, you'll see individuals show a bit of remorse, which is good because they recognize that things aren't okay, and we can definitely work with that. Ultimately, when we're coming down to the debriefing, we're trying to find a way for the individual to learn about themselves, a way that they can use coping skills to better themselves. Ideally, when you're talking about this cycle, you find ways to exit the cycle, okay? Along the way here. If we can exit before the harmful event, that's what we're looking for. Finding ways to exit involves the individuals learning about themselves. Once again, us learning about the individual, creating relationships, finding ways to help the individuals exit that cycle also. Last, we get down to the calm and norm, and the cycle can repeat themselves. They can go through multiple cycles in a day. Sometimes people cycle really quickly. So once again, this is really about relationship. It's about knowing your consumer and finding ways to help them in situations that can become a crisis situation.
Finally, we want to talk about debriefing. Debriefing is reviewing the results after a significant incident or behavior has happened with your consumer. You need to debrief for them and yourself. When you debrief, you need to be in a calm state, and your client needs to be in a calm state. If you need to discuss it with your team first or program manager first, that's fine, but eventually it needs to be discussed with everyone, yourself, the team, and your consumer. You need to find out if what you did in reaction to the behavior helped or if it didn't help, if it made the situation worse or if it made the situation better. The next time you'll know if you need to do that or not. Your consumer will have great insight on how it made them feel. And it's really all about how it's going to de-escalate their behavior, so they should have a lot of input about that. Please remember that after significant behavior has happened, don't just move on. Spend time reflecting on it, on yourself and with your consumer, and make sure that moving forward that you're going to have the best plan possible for your consumer.
Thank you so much for joining us and watching these supplemental videos. We really hope that they help you in your day-to-day interactions with your client.